Hi, welcome to Random Shit from a Gen Xer. My name is Brian. I'm 59 years old. I live in the Oak Lawn neighborhood of Dallas, Texas. I live here in a wonderful 603 square foot, huge apartment. Okay, maybe huge is the wrong word, but it's very comfy, believe it or not. Maybe one of these days I'll go ahead and I'll show you around. But welcome to episode 1. I'm getting used to doing all this. I've got no idea what I'm going to do. I'm going to be talking about basically whatever goes ahead and pops up into my mind. Today, what we're going to go ahead and talk about is basically, we're going to go ahead and talk about me. It's not my favorite subject in the world. Everybody hates talking about themselves. But I'll just go ahead and give you a little history on me. So there's a bit of a different angle of how I got down here to Texas. And I was born in Madison, Wisconsin. Well, not Madison, in Stoughton, Wisconsin. My mother was supposedly, this is what my parents tell me, my mother was a 15-year-old, last name of Anderson, Andersen, and I'm guessing that she was in one of those places that they had back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and even into the 70s a little bit, to where when teenagers would get pregnant, they'd go off to school. Well, I think that's what happened with my mom. I was born in January, and I don't remember much of being born because, of course, I was just born. Now, one of the earliest memories I have is from when we lived in Milwaukee, and we lived there, I don't know, 6 months or a year or something like that. I have no idea. I can't remember. Once again, I was a little bit too small. But one of the things that I do remember, and I think that this makes it so that I don't know, I guess I must have been a little bit older than 2 before we moved, because I do remember sitting in a window in our flat, which is old school term for an apartment, or if you're from England, it's term for an apartment, or it could be like a condo type thing, but that's what they call them over there, and what they did call them over here for a little while. But anyways, so I was born there. Born in Stoughton, lived in Milwaukee. Earliest thing I can remember is seeing a birthday party of kids down in the courtyard of our building. And then all of a sudden, somebody dressed up in a bear suit. I have no idea what that has to do with anything, but there it was. It was a bear suit in the middle of Milwaukee in the summertime. So who knows? Anyways, after living in Milwaukee for a little while as a child, we moved up to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, to where my mother's family was. Well, my mother and my father's family. There's not much that goes on in a UP, and therefore both my mom and my dad moved to Milwaukee, to where there were more jobs than what there was up in the UP. By this time, the Kingsford plant, and yes, that's Kingsford charcoal. I think the Kingsford plant had been closed down by that time and moved to Louisville, where it is now. But anyways, Dad had a gas station that he leased from Shell, and then Mom was a stay-at-home mom. In 70, my little sister came around, and yeah, just like all older boys and younger sisters, we did not get along, and we still have our times, but we're trying. Anyway, moved there, lived there up until like 70 or 71. Dad decided that he was going to go back into the military. My dad had been in just about every branch but the Air Force. He was a Marine, he was a Merchant Marine, he was in the Coast Guard, he was in the Army, and he decided since he only had like 7 or 8 years left to retire that he would go ahead and go back into the service and he would retire. Or do his years so that he could go ahead and retire and get, benefits, which were 50% of his salary and all that. So we did that. We moved to Astoria, Oregon. Astoria, Oregon might be familiar to some of you Gen Xers. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, Astoria, Oregon is where they went ahead or Oregon, however you pronounce it. Anyways, it was the filming locations for Turner and Hooch, The Goonies, Short Circuit, Kindergarten Cop. Funny story about Kindergarten Cop. When it was my turn to go ahead and go to school there, they went to the school. I remember going in, but then I never went. So I got to walk in the halls, but I never got to go. So that's that. I've got more brushes with fame, and I'll go ahead and go into those in other episodes. But mainly this is just you getting to know me, and maybe you'll want to go ahead and come back around sometime. So lived there in Astoria, Oregon for a while. I think 74, Dad got transferred to St. Louis, Missouri to become a recruiter. And he was a recruiter downtown, but we lived up in Ferguson. Yes, that Ferguson. So my formative school years, no kindergarten, because by the time that I got down there to Ferguson, I was a little bit older. They didn't want to put me with younger kids, and they had felt that my mom, through flashcards and everything else such as that, had gone ahead and taught me well enough that I wouldn't miss anything going into the first grade. Well, no problem with that, but just about 3 days into school, I remember going for my eye exam, and then my mom and dad going up to the school, and then figuring out I've got to wear these damn things for the rest of my life, or contacts, one of the two. But at that age, you're not, in the 70s, you're not giving your kid contacts. Let's just be straight up and clear with that. But I was a hell of a cute little boy. But I digress. So we went ahead and we lived there for up until like 76 or 77. 76 it must have been, because Dad then got transferred from there to New York. Montauk, New York to be exact. Our place was in Springs, which is kind of like the next town over in between East Hampton and Sag Harbor. So we lived out there for a couple of 2-3 years. Experienced a huge snowstorm of 78 that one day dropped like 28 inches or 30 something inches, and the next like 2 or 3 days later went ahead and it dropped another 20 some odd inches of snow. It was crazy, I'm telling you. But after that, Dad did go ahead and retire. We moved back to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan because my grandma wasn't feeling good. She was having some problems. Turned out that it was cancer. And we lost my grandma in 78, not too long after we moved back. But we stayed there in Michigan. So let's see, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade. So 5 years. I don't know why I kept thinking it was 4, but it was 5. So ended up living there. And with all the snow and everything else, Dad decided that he didn't want to go ahead and shovel snow anymore. So Dad decided to make a little scouting trip down here in April, May of, I don't know, 81. 81, 82, somewhere around in there. So Dad made a scouting trip down here, and his two places to go were Midland, Odessa. Well, three places: Waco, and then Temple. And the reason he chose those three places because my dad was working for the VA system, and he could go ahead and transfer down here and keep his job and pay rate and everything such as that. So he went to Midland, Odessa, and hated it, just like everybody else in the world. Okay, maybe not everybody, but I've been to Midland. That's another story for another day. But anyways, so we were down here, and our dad was down here. He went and checked out Waco, and he didn't like Waco either. Said it was just too big. And this is for a family that basically has lived in small towns. So basically, yeah, lived in small towns for the most of our lives. And he felt Waco with about that time, I'm guessing about 100,000 people just in the city of Waco alone, maybe another 20,000 in Woodway, another 5 or 10,000 in Belmead. But, it was a pretty good sized city for what we were used to. Went down to Temple. He really liked Temple a lot. More of a small town feel. Temple itself at the time had about 46,000 people. He decided on Belton because it had a little bit smaller school system. Only about 12,000 people were living there in Belton at the time. And so we moved to Belton. My high school years, I always thought that my big claim to fame was going to be that I went to high school with George Eads. If you don't know who George Eads is, remember regular CSI, the first one from Las Vegas? He played, I think his name was Nick on there. I can't remember exactly. But, yeah, that was a big thing. Our big thing. That and one of my other friends, Toby Metcalf, he was in the movie Pure Country with George Strait. He played one of the brothers. He played the brother that his big line was, "We need to get a rope." And yeah, so that was him. Now, lived in the Central Texas area, Belton. I'm getting ahead of myself. So graduated high school, went to school over at that time it was called TJC. Now I believe it's called Temple Community College or something to that effect. And went to school there for a little while. Didn't do the greatest not because I was a bad student, but because the drinking age was 19 at the time. And I liked to party a little bit too much. Yeah, you'll learn more about that later too. But I worked for HEB for a lot of years. Basically from time I was 16 up to 2021. Did a couple of other things in between. I had a coffee route up in Waco. I was working for a coffee company up in Waco to where I'd go all around the state. Dallas, Houston, Bryan College Station, Austin. I was going everywhere, driving. And I enjoy driving. Driving is fun. It's a good release. There's nothing like just pointing your car some way down the highway and just going. And you don't know where you're going to end up sometimes. And it's a lot of fun, and you can see a lot of different things along the way. Road trips are some of my favorite thing to do, either planned or unplanned. It's been a while since I've done an unplanned one, but I'm going to have to do one soon. And we'll keep you updated on that. But, so, growing up in the 70s and 80s was a lot of fun. It really was. And then being a young person in the late 80s and early 90s was a lot of fun too. It was really enjoyable. There's a lot of stories that I've got for you. I'm going to tell you this, just a little sneak preview. I was a chauffeur for 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 for 6 years. And I've driven everybody. And when I say everybody, okay, maybe not literally everybody, but a lot of big people, including this guy here. Oh, not right. Vince Gill. Never got to drive that guy up there, but we'll have some stories about his stuff. Searchers, my number one favorite movie of all time. But there's a lot that we have to cover. Hopefully you'll stay around for whatever happens. Y'all have a good night. I'll talk to y'all later in the week. Bye.